and going to the real society, US capital market is the most vibrant, has the most liquidity, has good valuation there as well. With 20-30 people, you can generate 20-30 million revenue in 1 to 2 year time. AI really changing so fast. It is going definitely to disrupt the whole space, the whole industry. By having a growth mindset, I think your growth trajectory, is there. I think just hustle.
Jeffrey, I'm super excited to have you on this week's episode of the Silicon Valley Podcast. Now, we've had a couple conversations before. I've learned about your background. Spectacular. But for our listeners out there, can you give a little bit of the history of your career, what you've worked on, before we really dive into the question?
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Yes, so I started Patsnap 18 years ago. This is my first and only job since graduating from National University of Singapore. It definitely has been a hell of a ride, as like many other startups, you went through many up and down. And I would say we are fortunate that we are still surviving and still working hard to continue to grow the company to the next stage.
So your company itself, and for many people here in Silicon Valley, even though the company is absolutely huge, may not be familiar with it. Can you give a little background or little information on what the focus, what the company, key product, key offerings, what does the company do?
Yep. So Patsnap, we are a R&D and IP intelligence company. So we actually collect the patents data from all around the world, close to 170 countries. And since the first patent published 300 years ago, we have all the patent data, and we collect all this patent data, do further analysis, and provide these insights, this analysis, this database to our user, especially in the corporate who involve a lot in R&D. So they will use our tools to map out the patent landscape, the freedom to operate landscape, as well as understanding the R&D roadmap of the industry, the R&D trend. So this is essentially, in a nutshell, what our tools do.
Now, Jeffrey, question there with your company. I mean, I think it is unicorn status. Why haven't you gone public? What have been kind of the changes over the lifespan of your business for the metrics or criteria for a company to go public?
Yeah.
How has that changed?
Actually, just like many other companies now, especially in the SaaS business and in nowadays IPO benchmark, I think all of us are striving for the rule of 40 and at a certain scale. So
Jeffrey, for our audience, what is the rule of 40?
Yep. Rule of 40 is basically you add up your growth rate and your profit margin. Let's say 20% growth rate and 20% margin. That add up will be 40. So it can be different combination. It can be 30% growth, 10% margin. But as long as it add up to 40 and more, then I think it will be a good benchmark to strive for in nowadays kind of market condition. And for us, we are striving for 20% growth and 20% margin, and to reach about 200 to 250 million revenue size in the next 2 to 3 years. I think if we can hit that with that rule of 40, then I think we should be in a good spot, in a better spot.
So that rule of 40, does that kind of determine if a company can go public or not, or why are so many of these companies just staying private for so long?
I think they are, first I will answer the rule of 40. I think having that rule of 40 as a North Star or as a benchmark, I think is healthy, because back in the days, what I will call the ZERP era, the zero interest rate, I think most of us are going for growth. And with with great cost now looking at hindsight. But as a company and on a ongoing, sustainable, healthy basis, I think it's good to balance the growth rate and your bottom line. And I think that Rule of 40 gives us a good high-level framework. And in terms of private or not, at least my belief is how I see going public and listed is like graduated from university and going to the real society. I think being private and being public each have its own pro and con. But to me, going into becoming a public company is something I see is a good kind of a life cycle for the company. And for myself personally, I'm always curious to find out like what is next. How is it like to run a public listed company? How is it like to, report a quarterly earning? And if you do it well or not, yeah, we have to deal with it. I'm curious to learn and find out.
Question there. I mean, why not potentially go public on the Singapore exchange and then maybe NASDAQ, or wouldn't, I'm guessing people have already been knocking on your door for years now and say, hey, come on over to our exchange. Why, if you're curious, how come not sooner?
Yep. Yes, actually we US stock market is definitely being NASDAQ or NYSE is kind of our first option because actually the bar is also the highest. But at the same time, we also keeping our option open. For example, like Hong Kong Stock Exchange or like what you mentioned, Singapore Stock Exchange. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, Singapore Prime Minister has in their latest annual budget for Singapore have launched, included an initiative, I think close to about $5 billion that to be used to promote better activity, more activity, and more listing in the Singapore Stock Exchange. So all this we are actually keeping a close eye on and still keeping it open. But obviously, US capital market is the most vibrant, has the most liquidity, has good valuation there as well. It's more mature as a capital market.
But let's circle back a little bit more on your company. I'm kind of curious. We didn't talk about it, but intellectual property. Where did that idea come from? Why focus on IP and R&D intelligence? How did you identify a gap there in the market?
Yep. So when I look back my own journey, at least I will say there are a lot of serendipity and kind of one leads to another. So my background is I'm biomedical trained engineer. And when I was studying in National University of Singapore, there was a program that sent entrepreneurial minded students to go overseas, such as United States, for a year or two and work intern full-time at a local startup and study part-time in a local business school. So I was sent to Philly in the East Coast and work in a medical device startup and study part-time in UPenn in Wharton Business School. So, and during that stint in that medical device startup, which when I joined is only two bosses, co-founders, and myself. I was the first employee, first intern. And I was helping them because it's medical device. So I'm helping them with a lot of patents, due diligence, intellectual property due diligence. And in the process, I find that actually patents are really, really useful. So even though it is a very long and legally full with legal jargon and seems boring, hard to understand document, but if you know how to dissect it and understand the key part, it is a very useful document that tell you how certain invention works. And if you analyze across the last 300 years of patent corpus in the world, literally any invention in the world, you should be able to find something on the patent corpus that someone has explained how that things work, what are the benefits, what are the disadvantages, etc. So I find that fascinating. So after the experience in US, working in that startup for 1.5 years, and I went back to Singapore, finished my remaining degree, and I was thinking to myself, hey, why not give it a start? Since this is quite interesting and it's fascinating, and that entrepreneurship program I attended, that kind of also taught me like how to do fundraising, how to build a business plan. So I thought to myself, hey, why not just apply what I learned into this idea that I find fascinating? And that is how we started Patsnap, looking at all the patent data and try to make it more readily available and useful for people in the world.
Question right there. How do patents truly serve innovation? What role do they play in today's fast-paced tech landscape? I mean, you kind of mentioned a little bit, but I mean, I'd really like you to go a little bit deeper
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah. So this is usually how I try to explain someone from outside of our industry. Because when the first thought of patents or IP, I think in general, the public will be, oh, this is a very legal, hard to understand thing. But actually, the question is why there even a patent system exists. It's actually, it's a deal. It's a commercial deal arrangement between the government and the inventor. So the government say that, Mr. Inventor, I give you 20 years of exclusive right. In return, you have to disclose everything, all the know-how, the knowledge about this particular invention into this piece of document called patent, such that anyone else who read this patent by right, they can reproduce the invention. And that is the criteria up until today for granting a patent. So that's why patent contain a lot of useful and what I call high density information. But because it's constructed under a legal framework, so over the years, it became a legal document, even though in spirit, it should be a technical invention document. And through what we are doing in Patsnap, applying AI and other tasks, we now can make this information that kind of hide beneath the surface and make it more readily available so that someone like yourself, myself, or someone in university, a researcher, they can now access and make use of this information, even though they are not legally trained.
So if someone's disclosing their idea to the world so that anyone could reproduce it, and when did they kind of actually not want to disclose their patents? I mean, when do companies choose to disclose it? I mean, what would the strategic advantage of doing so really be?
Yeah. So under the umbrella of intellectual property, there are a few type of IP, so-called trademark being one of it. Trade secrets like the Coca-Cola formula is one of it. And the other type is patents. For patents to work, if you want to have 20 years of exclusive monopoly right, then you have to disclose everything. And by disclosing it and the government grants you a patent, then in the next 20 years, you are the sole owner of this right, of this invention. If anyone else want to use this invention by right, they have to talk to you, they have to discuss commercial terms with you, and have to get a license from you. So, and most of the time, companies do that to protect their new product invention, like iPhone, covered by many patents, and many devices. So a lot of having patents to protect your invention, your product, I think is key nowadays.
How do you say kind of AI possibly disrupting the whole patent space? And what I mean by that is I'm kind of curious because if your information is out there so that anyone could reproduce, and yes, you have 20 years uh, of a monopoly of creating that, I would think that AI would be able to come in, analyze, and go, okay, we'll tweak this a little bit here, or we'll tweak that a little bit there, and just enough to go around a patent and reproduce something similar. I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you see people really taking advantage of technology now to get around patents that people are producing, or not?
Yep. Definitely, people are trying to kind of what they call going around or circumvent the patent rights. But this is always a cat and mouse kind of issue. So being the inventor or the company who file patents, there are also a lot of IP strategy. So in a particular invention, how do you file multiple patents to protect your invention such that make it very, very hard for someone to try to go around your invention. So that is where our tools also come in handy. Like using our tool or our tool like us, help you analyze the whole IP landscape and give you a better way to give you insight and have a better strategy to protect your IP in a more holistic way.
Question with that, with the strategy and having these patents around it, and many startups, early stage companies, they just don't have the funding to even issue a single patent, let alone multiple. But I mean, if they did have the money to register patents today or focus more on growing the business, what's kind of the exchange that they should be thinking of
Yeah.
allocating money towards patents versus allocating money towards growing the business? How should they be thinking of that very early on?
Yeah. I mean, being a startup ourselves and in the tech space, I will say, yeah, we only really start filing our own patents quite late in our company life cycle as well. I think for many startups, I think the first key milestone is actually really proving the product market fit, having an actual customer willing to pay you something for what you do. I think should be always the priority. There are certain scenario, like for example, in the pharma, life science, biotech area, that is important from day one to have a very good IP patenting strategy. So depends on industry, but I would say at least our own experience in the tech space, in the internet B2B SaaS space, I would say the first couple of years we are just trying to survive, get more revenue, get customer. We only really file our patents, like I would say, towards later stage of our own life cycle as well.
What was the decision for you and your team to finally start filing your own patents?
I think first, definitely we are doing something that is by destination new and novel, that no one else has done that, because those are the criteria to get a patent. So when we actually keep investing a lot more R&D and we actually build certain features, certain algorithm that, hey, looking over the world globally, the industry, hey, we are seems like the first one to actually have breakthrough in this certain aspect. That is, and that those features are very valuable to our customer, and it can be our own very differentiating feature. I think those are when we start thinking, considering filing patent ourselves.
And speaking of the growth of your business as the CEO over time, how are you able to digest so much information, macro information, of the fast growing landscape, the competition, and that? How does kind of your time get allocated between thinking of growing the business and thinking about all the outside things that could come and impact the business?
Recently, I was thinking this myself as well, like with the recent trade war and the AI advancement, that almost every other days, every few days, there's new AI model being launched, new, AI agent being launched. I do think like the recent time, the last couple of months has been really so much influx of information, uncertainties, the geopolitics, everything. So yeah, I actually think running a company now, in my opinion, is much harder than 20 years ago. Yeah, there are a lot of uncertainty. I think for me over the years, what I learned is at many points of time, there seems to have many issues coming at you. And I think the key thing is really have a clarity in thoughts and just think through what is the main trait, like what is the most single important issue at this moment, at this stage, in this quarter that you have to fix. Because if that issue you don't fix it, even though if you fix other issue, you just won't get to the next stage. So I think having that clarity in thoughts to know what is always the most important issue, prioritize it better, that kind of helped me unclutter the rest of the noise and help me focus on the key issue and work on it.
Jeffrey, question on kind of that one focus, that one important thing, and moving forward with that. Which would be a preference as a CEO to have kind of clarity, not uncertain times, or have let me say this again, which would be the preference to, or which would be worse for a CEO? The economy doing bad and in a downward direction, or a lot of uncertainty?
Also, one thing I learned over the years, my own experience, every scenario, every circumstances, there is good side to it and there is bad side to it as well. And of course, it depends from time to time as well. But most of the time as an entrepreneur, what we will try is try to see what are the opportunity in this set of circumstances. Yes, there are risks, there are uncertainty, but what are the potential good things that can come out of it? What are the opportunity that we can capture? Like for example, AI. I think AI really changing so fast. It is going definitely to disrupt the whole space, the whole industry. Which the risk is if we don't keep improving our technology, adopting AI, we may really be disrupted by some other players who are not even from our industry. At the same time, this urgency and our commitment to keep innovating in AI, it also, I see there is hope and a better future and potential that if we manage to capture this wave of AI, I think we will grow even more. So always there are two sides of the coin.
Well, what AI technology are you tracking right now?
Yes. So for example, like now for at least for our space in the SaaS software, I would say agentic framework. This AI agent is definitely the key thing we are working on. So the whole AI agentic framework, I believe, will change the way how we develop software. I think more and more increasingly nowadays, with 20, 30 people, you can generate 20, 30 million revenue in 1 to 2 year time. Is going to become increasingly more common. And why they can do that? Because the whole way of developing software is being changed now. In the past, when we develop software, like especially for enterprise software, we have to kind of write the code line by line. All the business logic have to written it down line by line. But now with an agentic framework, you don't have to just a couple of line of code calling the LLM and then let the LLM to decide to distribute the task and then to complete the task for the user, I think will be getting more and more common. And with that, it changed our product form factor and changed our go-to-market as well. So I think this is something that we have been looking into and working on it a lot.
Going back to said a little bit earlier, I am kind of curious to get the information of the market, of the macro environment, of everything to digest. How do you go about gathering that information? Do you have an assistant whose sole task is to get you information on these topics? Do you just have an incredible YouTube feed where the algorithm gives you this information? How do you go about, and is there a certain time every day where it's 30 minutes just allocated to what's happening in the world? Or how do you go about allocating things for our listeners who are CEOs out there that might want to try to copy best practice?
Yeah, I wish I have a personal assistant. Actually, this is a minor topic I've been debating with other or discuss with other founders. Like up until now, I don't have my personal EA or what, for better or for worse. So in terms of how I collect information, I read a lot of news. So every day, on my phone, I will click on like Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and weekly I will read on economies. So I really read a lot of news and published magazine to get all this input. And then that will be kind of the morning time or in between like break time. Then night time, I will try to read more long form blog. So yeah, I read a lot of long blog posts and also normal book reading. And during travel, when I'm on the road, then I will listen to podcasts, all the different podcasts. And then in my line of work, I talk to many other investors as well, other entrepreneurs. So this kind of all this data point, then I think so far then give me a good enough input that help me kind of form my decision, or at least how I should do what I should do with my business moving forward.
Speaking of your business moving forward, I mean, you founded based in Singapore. The
Yeah.
natural progression is to expand out of Singapore, I would guess, from day one. Could you talk about how that could be an advantage or a disadvantage for companies that are founded in Singapore or other countries that population may not be the biggest out there, may not be that billion-dollar China or India or the US market or Europe? Like how are the advantages and disadvantages of founding a company in a smaller country? What are they?
Yeah. I think Singapore is really unique. Singapore, yes, is very small, 4-5 million population, and it's just a small island, but it's quite well run. Because I've been traveling around the world, and I would still say Singapore government is one of the most well-run government in the world. But on the downside, the market is very small. So that's why we have to, from day one, go global. And many of my other entrepreneur friends from Singapore that managed to survive and grow big is because they also from day one, at least grow to the whole Southeast Asia, viewing it as the market as well. And my own experience running with Patsnap globally, I think to capture a market, you have to spend a lot of time in that market, especially in the startup stage, because every market is so different. Yeah, every country, every territory, every sector is so different. If you don't spend enough time in that country, in that sector, I think it's hard for you to really know what the customer want. So in the early years, even though we started in Singapore, but because we go global, in fact, most of my time I spend outside of Singapore so that with my team as well and to understand the local market better.
Can you talk about that when there's a new market that you want to land and expand in? Kind of what the planning is, the process is. 'Cause, I mean, you've done it. You're a global company and you've done this multiple times. Tell us kind of the best practices that have been developed over the many years.
Yeah, I will say we are still learning. Maybe one example is Japan market. So recently we start extending Japan market. So and Japan is very different, even though we cover other Asian country as well. But Japan is still a very different and has its own unique culture and way of doing business. So in the beginning, first, we will usually, if not myself, like Japan market in this case, I have my co-founder to go in charge of this market. You have to have someone that you trust, that have really good, strong working relationship, and that someone really know your business inside out. Someone like that to go into a new foreign country. And so far, the good combination of formula is have someone from your team that really understand your business inside out, have the trust. And then once they arrive that new market, find someone local to tag team. Then from there, slowly build out the team. That I will say so far that work best for us. And I know some other, like even consumer brand store. I know one consumer brand store, like they only send their store employee that have been with them more than like 5-6 years to go and set up a new branch. Like that kind of cultural inheritance, I mean, that derive from there. And then when you go to a local market, find someone local to be your partner and tag team. That I think is key.
Are there advantages or any strategies to connect with certain groups or people in these new markets? For example, maybe in advance, connect with the consulate general of that country that's in yours, or economic developer, or a company from your own country that's already been successful there that could guide and give partnerships. Are there any strategies of let's connect with these groups or people in advance?
Yeah. I will say in general, in the early days, like us in the early days, like you hustle. I mean, any resource like you can get, like economic development board or any like entity that can give you some resource to enter that new market. I think just hustle. As time goes by, like now we find that because we are familiar with our industry, we find that it's actually better if possible to find your industry like conference, the industry network. I think that will be more relevant. Like when we go hire the local or try to understand the local business, we will try attend the local industry conference, that our industry conference in Japan, for example, to familiar with the market, talk to the people there, and even recruit from there. So yeah, it depends. Of course, if you can afford to do that, if not, any resource definitely may be useful.
Have you ever gone to one of these markets, started testing it out, and then decided this isn't a fit for us? Let's just pull back completely.
Geographically, not really geography market, because I think for where our market is usually where there are a lot of R&D investment. So it's very clear from day one, like US, Europe, China, Japan, these are where there are a lot of R&D investment going on. There have been times that we launch a new product that didn't work out, that didn't reach a product market fit. Then yes, we have to retreat from there. That one, yes.
Speaking of launching new products, how do you prioritize innovation while ensuring the company meets the business goals?
Yeah, it's hard. It's not easy. And especially now we have to strive for rule of 40 profitability. In the early years of our company journey, back then, zero interest funding is relatively easier compared to now to get. So back then it just grow, grow, grow. Everything just, hey, that is a cool new idea. Let's work on it. Nowadays, yes, you have to juggle between the bottom line and yeah, the growth. So yeah, I have to really allocate resource much better. And as company grow, my own reflection as well, I'm becoming more and more to learn to allocate resources, to do trade-offs. But kind of a general rule of thumb, I think Google has that before, like 70-20-10. Like 70% of resource is working on what give you revenue for this quarter, for the next few quarter. 20% kind of in the 1 to 2 year time frame, more midterm horizon. 10% for slightly more longer horizon. Kind of rule of thumb, but I think looking at ourselves now currently on AI, for example, because it's evolving so fast, I think almost 80-90% is on AI. 10-15% is on the day-to-day just maintenance improvement.
You mentioned Google there. Are there any companies other than Google or maybe Google that you've looked at and said, they have some of the best practices out there. I'm going to learn from them and model what they've done and bring it in-house. Are there companies out there that while you're growing from Silicon Valley or any place in the world where you said, here's a model, I like what they're doing, I'm going to try to study them and incorporate as much as I can from what their practice is?
Yeah, I read a lot. I like to read a lot of founders' biography as well, and all their stories, founding story, how they grew the company is always really fascinating. I think in the early years of Patsnap, I did kind of try to, hey, Google has or Amazon have before start a meeting, you have a one-page memo. Everyone read or write that one-page memo, or Google have this and that practice. Try to emulate. But as time goes by, all this year, I find that if you just try to copy their certain practice, actually most of the time it's hard. The most key one I find that is the culture. And the culture is really hard to copy. You have to really internalize those values, those mission in order to have that type of practice or manifestation from those. So yeah, recently I've been thinking like for Patsnap, we have been around for 15 plus years, and I find that increasingly as we want to grow our talent base, as we want to grow the team, like how do we, it all boils down to culture, a strong culture, which is key. And culture, you can't just read a book, understand someone else's culture and try to copy. It's very hard.
With that, any way to place in words what the culture of Patsnap is?
Yep. I've been thinking about it a lot recently and try to crystallize it. If I were to say, I think is the number one will be having a growth mindset, like reflect and learn and keep growing. Because all the years, my own experience and looking at myself and the team whom I have worked with, who succeeded in their role, is always just keep learning, having an open mindset, be open to ideas, have that curiosity, and even though make mistake and fail, but you have that humility to acknowledge it and learn from it. I met many, many smart people in my life, like from Stanford, from MIT. Like they are definitely IQ is much higher than myself and is smart. But I find that a lot of time they don't really like open. It's not open in the sense that they think they are right and not open to new ideas. So I find that at least the team I work with, people I work with, that always, yes, you may come from a low base. You may not come from a good university. You don't know a lot of stuff, but by having a growth mindset, I think your growth trajectory, is there. And I see many, many examples of that.
Now, is there any way, say there's an early stage company, is there any way for them to change their culture as they grow intentionally,
Mm.
intentionally change it?
Is I can only tell from my own experience is hard especially once you have more and more people, a lot of culture are kind of ingrained. Um, it's possible to change. It has to come from the number one. It has to come from the top, from the CEO, him or herself, because everyone looks up to the number one. What he say, like what I say and what I do, is it aligned? And when I make certain decision, is it aligned? Like everyone will look at my cues, look at my action to get the cue of, is Jeff has been saying this, like, is this really the way of doing things in Patsnap? Like, it has to come from number one for me to keep practicing what I preach, in fact, to sometimes even over communicate and amplify it and be very conscious about it. It's a lot of work.
Are there any times where you might be saying something just casually, but people around you hear that and take that for word and go in certain directions that are surprise you? I mean, how careful do you have to be with everything you say as the company grows?
Yeah. So many, many times. And at times are quite frustrating. And it's like, that is not what I meant. And sometimes it's just a passing comment, like, and especially as founder, at least for me, I try to contain it more nowadays. Like in the early years, like as being a founder, like an idea guy, product guy, had many ideas. Like, oh, that is cool. Oh, that is cool. Let's try that. As company grow, I learn to contain myself. Like this excitement. Okay, yeah, cannot tell them too many things and too different things at different time. I think they cannot get it or digest it. And in fact, worse is they interpret in different way. Then I cannot align the whole company to one goal. So now I definitely more thoughtful and more moderate when I share certain things to them, that I want to make sure what I share with them is kind of aligned with the company goal, the direction for the year.
That's interesting. I almost picture you just a casual coffee meeting. And next thing you know, the company goes in that direction or that
Yeah,
direction. And so
yeah.
then how can a
That's
CEO, when the company gets big, like how do you just brainstorm ideas with people without them, going and off on a tangent? Is there, I don't know, masterminds or other CEO circles, or do you just brainstorm going on long walk?
I think different way or different perspective. So for me, if let's say it's company issue, I want to discuss like, oh, I'm facing this issue in company related stuff, then usually I will go to my kind of founders group, because being founder to founder, I think other founders, and especially at similar stage, they will have that empathy and kind of understand what you are going through. So we kind of brainstorm or kind of yeah, just chat through that to get idea, and sometimes just to get comfort, because when you are knocked down by all the daily frustration and setback, talking to someone, another founder, I think it helps a lot. That is on when I thinking about company wide stuff. If let's say on a certain business line, on a certain product, then yeah, I will go to the direct let's say product manager or the business leader involved, and then 4 or 5 person of us, different department, then we will try to brainstorm about it. Because ultimately, the particular business line or product line, getting, and not just the leader, but people on the first line, like on the front line, I think that is key, because a lot of time I find a lot of good ideas come from the people on the front line that actually working on the issue day to day or working with the customer. Those actually have those a lot of many good ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just at a conference and I was talking to a gentleman there, and he was asking me if we were just talking about pretty much the same thing of who to get ideas from and that. And he was telling me about a factory line, and it was
Mm,
for, putting the toothpaste in the tube. And they had this issue where some of the toothpaste tubes would not get the toothpaste, and it would just show up at you know, the store, and people would open up or whatever, and there'd be no toothpaste. And they brought in a consultant. The consultant
mm,
said, yeah, for $300,000, we'll fix that solution, because what you really need is a scale here that will measure every tube's weight as it goes down the line. It needs
mm,
to be this precise and all that. And it'll take, whatever, 2 months to build all this stuff. And then, they told the people on the factory line that, and the next day, they get a call. They're like, yeah, problem's fixed. They're like, what do you mean the problem's fixed? Like, the consultant said it would take months and hundreds of thousands of dollars and all this stuff. And they're like, well, the guy on the assembly line, he just put a fan next to it. So if the tube has no toothpaste, it gets blown off the assembly line. And you're like,
mm.
oh, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is our own experience as well. I think sometimes the glorified consultant sometimes even make it over complicated and charge arms and legs for that.
Jeffrey, before we wrap up, I'm really curious. Can you share an example of how Patsnap has helped the company unlock innovation or avoid costly IP mistakes?
Yeah, there are many ways our product help them to do that. First is getting to latest, very timely patent and legal data around those patent data, because you have to make decision based on the latest data. And from there, we help them do a lot of analysis. Like we have one feature that map out all the pattern and visualize it on a mountain and kind of ocean visualization. So help the user can visualize the landscape really like a landscape. Like, oh, this mountain belongs to which company, have this technology, like things like that, that help them get in a very short amount of time, help them get a quick overview of the whole intellectual property landscape. That I think is our value, getting to faster decision and better answer in a quickest way possible.
And Jeffrey, if anyone wants to learn more about yourself, your company, what's the best way to go about doing it?
Can just visit our company website, www.patsnap.com. Yeah, we have all the information there. We have free version that user can just go and sign up and try it themselves.
That's fantastic. Okay, we'll have a link in the show notes. And for our audience, I'm not the host of the Silicon Valley podcast. I'm an investment banker focused on mergers, acquisitions, growth capital, and secondaries. Connect with me on LinkedIn at Sean Flynn. And don't forget to go to our website, thesiliconvalleypodcast.com, where you could see all our archives. And I want to thank Finalis, who's one of our partners on the Investment Podcast Network. They're the broker-dealer of choice for hundreds of bankers around the world. And I also want to thank everyone else that has supported the show over the years. So with that, Jeffrey, thank you for taking the time to be on this week's episode of the Silicon Valley Podcast.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for the conversation.